Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. Sheila Butler has spent her career helping brands find their voice, build loyalty, and leave a lasting legacy. As a chief marketing officer and founder, she understands transformation, how something evolves, grows, and becomes stronger. But long before she was guiding global brands and launching loyalty programs, Sheila experienced a transformation of her own. She's a 20 plus years cancer survivor, and that chapter of her life reshaped not only her perspective, but her resilience, ambition, and sense of purpose. In recognition of Cancer Awareness Observance, today's conversation explores what survivorship really means, not just medically but personally. Talk about strength, identity, gratitude, and how life after a diagnosis can influence everything that follows. Welcome to the podcast, Sheila.
Thank you, Wisdom. It's nice to see you again. Happy New Year.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. So my journey. Wow, where do I start? I mean, actually, here's where I will start. Having cancer was a gift in my life. I didn't know it at the time, but it was a gift. It helped me put things into perspective, things that I thought were important at the time, especially around material things. And for example, right after I was diagnosed with cancer, I remember I had a news program on, and it's in the United States, it's this show called The Today Show. And so they do hard hitting news for like the first hour. And then after that, they talk about fashion and food, and they interview celebrities about their movies. And I remember they had this segment on what were the in fashion handbags for fall, like the must have things to be the cool person. And I thought, wait, I have cancer. Like, I don't care about the fact that the hobo bag or whatever it was at the time is like the it bag. And if you don't have that, then you're not an it person. Like, it just, everything you thought was influence, like all these external forces of magazines and people telling you what's the right thing to do and the right way to be and the right thing to say and whatever, suddenly didn't matter. Because what I will tell you is that as soon as I was diagnosed with cancer, it's the first thing you think about in the morning. It's the last thing you think about at night. And I thought, when does this become a part of my existence to where it's not the first thing I think about when I wake up? I can think about something else, like how excited I am to conquer the day and what exciting things I'm going to do at work. And when am I going to go to sleep? And it's not the last thing that I think about when I think about something else instead. But cancer framed everything in a different way for me. And I haven't looked through the same lens since that time.
A lot of I think I don't know if it's a common phrase. I guess not phrase. Statement. Yeah, that most cancer people diagnosed with cancer, they hide their diagnosis because once they talk about it, everything about them becomes the cancer. Like, oh, it's like when I saw you, I was like, "Hi, Sheila, how you doing?" You know, right? We're like, "Oh, Happy New Year," right? Well, if you told me that you had cancer, now the conversation would just change. I was like, "Oh, how you doing? Is the medicine working?" Like now, it's all about the cancer. We're no longer talking anything about you, Sheila. And of course, wanting to know about the cancer, that's itself is not, there's nothing bad about it. But when you wake up, you sleep, everywhere you go, it's about cancer. You start wondering if you've become a walking epitome of cancer itself.
Yeah, it becomes, I think, a part of your identity. It's a part of your story. But I was a daughter. I'm a sister.
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a professional. I'm a marketer. I'm a lot of other things, but it can overtake your life. And suddenly the cancer becomes the identity of who you are. And what I will say is that I was very lucky that I had people surrounding me so that as I went through, and I had the works, I had the surgery, I had chemo, I lost my hair, I had to grow it back, I had radiation, I had reconstructive surgery, tamoxifen for 5 years, I got all the hormone therapy later, and all these different things. I was fortunate to have people around me to where, because they were coming to my appointments as well, I didn't have to explain to 8 people later that day because they're all caring about me. And they said, "How was your appointment? What happened? Did everything go okay? How are you feeling after chemo?" I had spokespeople almost that would help me. So I didn't have to keep telling, because frankly, I'm exhausted at that point and I'm feeling sick from the chemo. Um, I will say that I made sure that each chemo session that I had, which I had 8 over the span of 4 months, I had someone sit with me during chemo, and sometimes it's a half day. At least in my case, everyone's cancer is different, and they treat
Yeah.
it based upon your cancer and your markers and your body and all these things. But I, I don't think that anyone should sit there alone going through chemo. And it is very lonely. Having cancer is incredibly lonely because at the end of the day, everyone said, people would say, "I wish it was me instead of you." And I just, I know what you're going through. I'm like, "No, you don't. Like, I'm bald and I'm wearing a wig to work, faking it, hoping that some people don't realize that I'm going through cancer because I didn't feel sick until I actually started chemo. And then not only do you feel sick, but you look sick." And so it's a very private thing in a way. I will say that I was embarrassed to talk about my cancer when I was first diagnosed. I was working in a large company, and my spouse worked there as well. And I didn't want people to be talking about me. And because mine was breast cancer, it's a very personal cancer. I didn't want people to be talking about me and that in my work environment. And so I didn't tell people, and really close friends had to reach out to me and say, "Are you okay? Because we don't think you're okay, but you're not telling us something." And
Yeah.
that's when I had to start to open up about things. And I will also tell you, Wisdom, that I didn't share this story really publicly until I started running Butler Marketing Group about 2.5 years ago. Because frankly, whether or not this is grounded in reality, I was fearful that if a company knew that I was a cancer survivor, that they might see me as more expensive from a
Yeah.
healthcare perspective. And perhaps maybe they wouldn't want. And I don't know if that's like a legitimate fear of feeling like because I had cancer that I might be a target for, she's more expensive than someone else. But that was the story that I told myself. And so I didn't really open up about it broadly until after I started my company, which is how you and I ended up talking about this.
Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah. You said that having cancer was like a new chapter. I'm curious, how did this new chapter, this realization, and surviving cancer um, affect the work that you do now?
It's huge. What I will say is, I hope this is true. I'm going to say something and I'm going to bank on it that it is true.
Okay.
The hardest days of my entire life are behind me. For me, the hardest days were going through chemo. It was brutal. Working full time, I had just started an executive international MBA program. And so I would have chemo on Monday. I would get sick all day on Tuesday and try to sleep. I would go back to the office on Wednesday, would get sick at the office, but I was back at the office on Wednesday. And if it was a weekend where I had my executive MBA program, I would travel on a Thursday night down to Washington, D.C. from Philadelphia, or down to North Carolina and have class Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and have to travel back and be back at the office again. And I rinsed and repeated, and it was exhausting to me. But if those, telling myself that those were the hardest days of my entire life means that whatever I encounter now, running my business and wondering where's the next client going to come from, especially early on when I'm like, okay, bank account's getting low. When's the next client going to come in? I already know in my head that my hardest days of my entire life are behind me,
Yeah.
and I can get through anything.
Wow. That's such uh, a peculiar way to look at life.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Like I said, it's been a gift.
Yeah. You ever talk about, one of the things about having a diagnosis that could lead to death is that we start thinking about legacy. I'm curious now and in the past 20 years, how has legacy reflect itself in your work as a marketer and like, someone that does branding? How did cancer shape your understanding of what kind of legacy you
So
want to leave?
yeah, it's interesting because I have a process that I call Butler Branding Bootcamp, and it's a process that I created 20 years ago to help brand companies. And it works for individuals, it works for products, works for nonprofits, in addition to for-profit companies. And I used the process on myself as I was starting my business. And I got to the point in the process where I had to decide, what is my brand promise? If someone hires Butler Marketing Group, what do they get? And I really struggled with it. And I wrote it over and over again for about 2.5 weeks. And what kept gnawing at me was this phrase, leave a legacy. And I kept pushing it aside. And then I finally sat with that and became really real with myself. And that's what I do. That is my brand promise to companies, is that when they hire me and Butler Marketing Group and the people that work for me, we create marketing that leaves a legacy for companies, for individuals. And that's weighty, right? That's I'm creating something that will
Yeah,
outlast me or that campaign itself, right? It'll be forever there. And that for me is really amazing because I never had kids. I'm not married. You kind of wonder at some point in time if people reflect back and say, "Does anyone ever know I was here?" I will leave a mark. I will leave a mark in my friendships and my family and my clients.
well, well, for someone who is listening, who they've not been touched by cancer, you said that surviving cancer was one of the best things that happened to you. What would you say to those persons? What's a thoughtful way they can
You
observe, honor, and also encourage those that are going through, friends and families that are going through cancer, and also, um, you know, reimagine and reinvent their life without necessarily going through cancer?
know, wow, I could go in so many different directions. That's a great question.
Thank you.
I would say if you are someone who has a friend, a family member, someone who is ill and going through something that they're struggling with, often the instinct is to say, "How can I help you?" And frankly, that was overwhelming for me to hear sometimes because I don't know. I don't know how you can help me.
Yeah.
What I will tell you is the people that I still remember the things that they did it without asking. They just would bring me food. Or one person, this was back in the day when there were DVDs. So they put together a collection, a whole team of people that I had worked with, and they bought all of their favorite movies, knowing that when I was sick from chemo, I was going to be at home
Yeah.
and I was laying in bed and I just had time to watch movies. So they picked all their movies and sent all these DVDs to me, sort of unexpectedly. So be proactive and just think about what someone would enjoy. Sometimes it's just ordering groceries for them and having the meals prepared so that they don't have to worry about that because it's just one more thing that drains their energy.
What conversations do you think we're still not having openly enough when it comes to cancer?
I think that people don't understand a lot of cancer and the diagnosis and the treatments until they're touched by it. So for example, it was really interesting. Someone pulled, again, I was married at the time, someone pulled my spouse aside and they said, look, I don't really know much about breast cancer and the treatments, but you know, will Sheila lose her hair during the radiation or does she only lose that during chemo? And like, when is it going to grow back? And they were, they made themselves vulnerable enough to ask questions because they wanted to be informed, because they wanted to determine how they could help and be supportive. And no, you don't lose your hair during radiation. You definitely could lose it during chemo, depending upon the type of chemo that you have. And it's changed over the time in which I was treated to now, but still people to this day could lose their hair. And so I think it was really telling of this person who made themselves so vulnerable to say, I don't know a lot about this, but I want to support you. And so I'm going to ask questions that make me feel incredibly awkward. And again, when it's cancer of something that's so personal, it's often a very awkward conversation to have, regardless of whether or not you're having it at the office or whether you're having it with a family member.
Was there a specific moment when you realized while you were treating cancer that, oh, I'm not just surviving this, I'm becoming someone different because of it? Was there an epiphany? What do you call it now? Epiphany, yeah, something like that.
Yes. You know what? It is. And it's also the same moment that I realize how I approach challenges in my life, that are really, really like consequential things. So here's what happened. I remember I had gone through all of my treatments and I was in the waiting period of, before I could start my reconstructive surgeries. And so I had a lull of about 5, 6 weeks to where I didn't have anything going on. And I remember sitting on the couch in my library at my house in Pennsylvania, and I just became overwhelmed with grief. And I was inconsolable. I was sobbing so hard. And what I realized at the time is that was the first moment that I had processed in my heart that I had cancer.
Oh,
Now, granted, that was probably June, and I was diagnosed 8 months before. So, what I realize about myself is that when I come into a crisis, I take all of the emotion out of it and I treat it like a project. What are the big chunks? What are the big arcs that I have to get through? And what are all the teeny tiny steps within each arc that I have to attack? And I will do it. What do I need to do? What does it need to get done? I will do it. Do I need someone's help? Boom, I move on. I take all of the emotion, the mental stuff out of it. I just treat it like it's a project, like I'm cleaning out my closet or I'm launching a marketing campaign and here are all the steps I need to do. That's probably not the healthiest of things, but that's how I managed to cope through the fact that I had to get through something that I didn't know how to get through.
yeah.
And so
Oh,
then when it finally hit me, it hit me so hard, you could have knocked me over with a feather. And that's when I
wow.
started to process all the other layers because there's the physical element of cancer, there's the emotional, there's the mental, and there's the spiritual side too. And I had only treated the physical.
Well, earlier on, I did ask you a question, and there's something you said, and I really do hope that that's true. I guess time will tell. You said that you could so far you could say that cancer has been the darkest thing that has happened to you, and I guess part of me want that to be true because I don't want something more terrible than cancer to happen to you, right? Again, any of those things. But I'm curious, having gone through that and having that in your mind that, oh yeah, I've gone through worse. I mean, this is just a rainy day, like, the weather is just bad. It's not that difficult. I mean, I had cancer and I
Yeah.
survived, right? How did that affect the way your ambition, the way you the way you seize opportunities and chase and go after the goals, the things you want to do, the purpose, life itself.
Yeah. Uh, Again, like what's the worst that can happen? People fear rejection. Yes. Does rejection suck? Of course it does. No one wants to be rejected, but at the same time, it's not a life or death thing,
Yeah.
right? I can move on from it. So again, I think that for me, an element that would be really dark is if I were diagnosed again. And I've had cancer scares for the past 5 years and multiple biopsies and whatever. And you sit and think, God, like the first time I just did everything they told me I should do because I wanted to make sure that I'm alive. Okay, great. So
Yeah.
fast forward 2 decades later, I'm still here. But if I were diagnosed again, Would I approach it in the same way? I I don't know. I'm in a different life stage. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. And I hope that moment doesn't come, which is why I want to firmly believe that my darkest day is behind me and won't happen again.
Yeah. Well,
You don't know.
yeah.
I have to come from a place of hope. I have to function from that place.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila, for sharing the story with us and for sharing how it has affected how the work you do and how you approach the work you do. And I know I keep saying the work you do, but Sheila does marketing and branding. And how can listeners, beyond just the marketing and branding, the work that you do, how can listeners, connect with you and learn more about the work you're doing?
Absolutely. They can find me on LinkedIn.com under Sheila Butler. They can reach out to me at Sheila at Butler MG for Butler Marketing Group, so butlermg.com. They can go to my website. Any of those things. I would be happy to hear from people.
Oh, thank you so much. I will put the links in the description so the listeners can just click and go directly to the site. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Sheila.
Excellent. Wisdom, it's always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.